Hello. Are you ready to hear the last part of the Twits and see whether the bird's plan manages to work? Do you see how they get on? Okay, find a comfortable spot, get all your wiggles out, wiggly fingers, wiggly arms, wiggly feet and knees, give your shoulders a shake. Okay, ready? 1 and 2, we know what to do. 3 and 4, we sit on the floor. 5 and 6, our legs we fix. 7 and 8, we sit up straight. 9 and 10, we're quiet again. Right. Chapter 26. The ravens swoop over. They had only just finished the job when the roly-poly bird came swooping in, screaming, they're coming back!" Quickly, the birds flew back onto the roof of the house. The monkeys rushed into their cage and stood upside down, one on top of the other. A moment later, Mr. and Mrs. Twit came marching into the garden, carrying a fearsome-looking gun. "I'm glad to see those monkeys are still upside down," said Mr. Twit. "They're so stupid, they couldn't do anything else," said Mrs. Twit. "Hey, look at those cheeky birds still up there on the roof. Let's go inside and load our lovely new guns, and that'll be bang, 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 and bird pie for supper." Just as Mr. and Mrs. Twit were about to enter the house, 2 black ravens swooped low over their heads. Each bird carried a paintbrush in its claw, and each paintbrush was smeared with sticky glue. As the ravens whizzed over, they brushed a streak of sticky glue onto the top of Mr. and Mrs. Twit's heads. They did it with the lightest of touch, but even so, the Twits felt it. Oh no! "What was that?" cried Mrs. Twit. "Some beastly bird has dropped his dirty droppings on my head." "On mine too," shouted Mr. Twit. I felt it! "Don't touch it!" cried Mrs. Twit. "You'll get it all over your hands. Come inside and we'll wash it off in the sink." "The filthy, dirty brutes!" yelled Mr. Twit. "I'll bet they did it on purpose. Just wait till I've got my gun loaded." Mrs. Twit got the key from under the doormat, where Mugglewump had carefully replaced it, and into the house they went. Chapter 27. The Twits are turned upside down. "What's this?" gasped Mr. Twit as they entered the living room. "What's happened?" screamed Mrs. Twit. They stood in the middle of the room looking up. All the furniture, the big table and the chairs, the sofa, the lamp, and the little side tables, the cabinets with bottles of beer in it, the ornaments, the electric fire, the carpet, everything was stuck upside down to the ceiling. The pictures were upside down on the walls, and the floor they were standing on was absolutely bare. What's more, it had been painted white to look like the ceiling. "Look!" screamed Mrs. Twit. "That's the floor! The floor's up there! This is the ceiling! We're standing on the ceiling!" "We're upside down!" gasped Mr. Twit. "We must be upside down. We're standing on the ceiling, looking down at the floor." "Oh, help!" screamed Mrs. Twit. "Help, help, help! I'm beginning to feel giddy." So am I, cried Mr. Twit. "I don't like this one little bit." "We're upside down and all the blood's going to my head," screamed Mrs. Twit. "If we don't do something quickly, I shall die, I know I will." You see, look at everything up there on the ceiling. No wonder they thought it was upside down. "I've got it," cried Mr. Twit. "I know what we'll do. We'll stand on our heads. Then anyway we'll be the right way up." So they stood on their heads And of course, the moment the tops of their heads touched the floor, the sticky glue that the ravens had brushed on a few moments before did its job. They were stuck. They were pinned down, cemented, glued, fixed to the floorboards. Oh no. Through a crack in the door, the monkeys watched. They jumped right out of their cage the moment the Twits had gone inside, and the roly-poly bird watched, and all the other birds flew in and out to catch a glimpse of this extraordinary sight. Chapter 28. The Monkeys Escape. That evening, Mugglewump and his family went to the big wood on top of the hill, and in the tallest tree of all they built a marvellous treehouse. All the birds, especially the big ones, the crows and rooks and magpies, made their nests around the treehouse so that nobody could see it from the ground. "You can't stay up here forever, you know," said the roly-poly bird. "Why not?" asked Mugglewump. "It's a lovely place." "Just you wait till the winter comes," said the roly-poly bird. "Monkeys don't like cold weather, do they?" He's right. Look at it. It's a good house, though. "They most certainly don't," Mugglewump cried. "Are the winters very cold over here?" "It's all snow and ice," said the roly-poly bird. "Sometimes it's so cold a bird will wake up in the morning with his feet frozen to the bough that he's been roosting on." "Then what shall we do?" cried Mugglewump. "My family will be all deep freezed." "No, they won't," said the roly-poly bird, "because when the first leaves start falling from the trees in the autumn, you can all fly home to Africa with me." "Don't be ridiculous," Mugglewump said. "Monkeys can't fly." "You could sit on my back," said the roly-poly bird. "I shall take you one at a time. You will travel by the roly-poly super jet, and it won't cost you a penny." Chapter 29. The Twits Get the Shrinks. And down here, in the horrid house, Mr. and Mrs. Twit are still stuck upside down to the floor of the living room. "It's all your fault!" yelled Mr. Twit, thrashing his legs in the air. "You're the one, you ugly old cow, who was hopping around and shouting, 'We're upside down, we're upside down!'" Oh no, look at them. "And you're the one who said to stand on our heads so we'd be the right way up, you wistfully old warthog!" screamed Mrs. Twit. "Now we'll never get free! We're stuck here forever!" "You may be stuck here forever," said Mr. Twit, "but not me. I'm not going to get away. I'm going to get away." Mr. Twit wriggled and squirmed, and he squiggled and wormed, and he twisted and turned, and he choggled and churned, but the sticky glue held him to the floor just as tightly as it had held the poor birds in the big dead tree. He was still as upside down as ever, standing on his head. But heads are not made to be stood upon. If you stand on your head for a very long time, a horrid thing happens. And this was where Mr. Twit got the biggest shock of all. With so much weight on it from above, his head began to squash into his body. Quite soon it had disappeared completely, sunk out of sight into the fatty folds of his flabby neck. "Oh, I'm shrinking!" burbled Mr. Twit. "So am I!" cried Mrs. Twit. "Help me! Save me! Call the doctor!" yelled Mr. Twit. "I'm getting the dreaded shrinks!" And so he was. Mrs. Twit was getting the dreaded shrinks too. And this time it wasn't a fake. It was the real thing. Their heads shrank into their necks. Then their necks began shrinking into their bodies. And their bodies began shrinking into their legs, and their legs began shrinking into their feet. And 1 week later, on a nice sunny afternoon, a man called Fred came round to read the gas meter. When nobody answered the door, Fred peeped into the house, and there he saw on the floor of the living room 2 bundles of old clothes, 2 pairs of shoes, and a walking stick. There was nothing more left in this world of Mr. and Mrs. Twit, and everyone, including Fred, shouted, "Hooray!" Well, didn't they deserve that? Nasty Mr. and Mrs. Twit got what they deserved. Okay, so that's the end of our story time this week. And next week we will do some nice fun things. We can have a go at doing some, we'll do something fun with numbers, I reckon. And maybe some arts and crafts, perhaps. Anyway, have a lovely weekend. Look after yourselves, and we shall see you very soon. Bye-bye.